Morning.
Morning.
Yes, sir, we can.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody.
Morning.
Morning.
How's it going?
Good, and you?
Doing well. Looks like anybody else joining us. Okay. Cool. Sorry for being a minute or two late. Josh, thanks for taking some time to chat with us. You know, we've had a number of conversations over the last several months, and I know that you've got a real passion and heart for who are experiencing homelessness and really making sure that they have the resources they need. I also know that you've had a conversation with our city attorney that were concerns around the structures that you're currently building. And I wanted to get into detail there about, just one, what our concerns were, and then two, maybe what some ways that we can maybe, as an alternative, start thinking about ways that we can provide help to the sort of broad mission that you're committed to, but even maybe the tactic that you've chosen. Because I think that the idea of those smaller structures isn't a bad one. I think the nature of those structures does matter. And so obviously, Sam, but I've also Matlock to be here with us, who is our fire marshal. And I just wanted to have him talk a little bit. And Chief, I think it probably is best for Josh to kick off and kind of tell us a little bit about what you've been working on. So that way, in your own words, we can kind of hear about the structures that you've been working on. And then I think maybe Chief Matlock, you could kind of weigh in with some initial thoughts or perspectives.
Yeah, for sure. Chief, we haven't met formally, so, we'll do it on the computer here. But my background is in the military, and I grew up, in the country. And, my technical background in the military is with explosives and hazmat, so I'm well versed on various aspects of hazardous material and how to, I guess, mitigate exposure to certain risks with regard to people. And so I have a great heart for service. My grandfather was a volunteer firefighter for 20 years, and my brother is a police officer as well. And I've got 3 family members in the military currently serving. So, my community is Chattanooga, and that's where my heart is. I believe that if we don't have unity in our community, we don't have a country, and it starts with boots on the ground, people donning on fire jackets and rushing into, dangerous places. And so my goal here is to basically prevent, further exposure for those most at risk so that people from your department and the police department don't have to respond to situations in which, that they could be easily prevented through, a lot of safe communicated measures with respect to certain hazards that are present, with people who are living on the streets, be it an accumulation of trash and debris, a recklessness with regard to fire specifically in this case, and then also the need for people to stay warm and dry with the expected weather, rain, and different things. So, there's a unique demand out there for people on the streets with respect to having to stay warm and meet their human needs, to survive literally. This week I've been working with quite a few folks out there to stay warm and dry. My focus is to provide adequate shelter from the elements, and shelter is defined as a place where people can seek asylum from harm in terms of other people or the weather itself. And so that's the real combatant in this issue, is the foe of weather and a lack of resources, be it some things we take for granted, such as the close proximity to food and water, and having the availability of shelter. And transportation largely is on foot for these folks. And what I've personally seen is, a lot of response from police department and sometimes the fire department with respect to, needs out there, whether they're emergencies or not. Your people definitely answer the call as needed and very quickly. And, you are well resourced to do that. And so what I've begun is to, over the past 7 years, help people who are homeless or, I don't even really like using that term. Unsheltered is a better word, because their homes are the streets and tents and bungalows that we find, in the bushes out there. So, I think what I've been trying to do is really get a grassroots, boots on the ground kind of recon mission style understanding of what it's like to be someone on the streets, and finding that need is difficult at times. And so I think the most obvious thing is shelter, because it provides a sense of security and safety for someone to move out of that place to somewhere better. And so having a place to be, I think, is very important. Establishing a sense of belonging and being is important to humanity. And, I think that's what Sam and everybody on the group of, establishing this sanctuary or sanctified space, off of Peoples in 12th Street over there. And so, if you look at the proximity and location of these people, it's within a relative distance to the food bank, the library, and other medical services. So people don't tend to congregate in places where they can't get water, food, or basic shelter. And so a lot of community volunteers on a grassroots level have, through their own means, provided tents, sleeping bags, and socks, blankets, those sorts of things in various capacities. So, we kind of see that accumulation of stuff off of 11th Street near the Wellness Center, which is probably not ideal for a lot of reasons, but that's essentially where people are, and that's not where I'm building per se, because I talked to Sam basically to let everybody know kind of what I was doing, to include various people with regard to what direction to best take. And so what I've tested out was the theory of building a small structure in a quick amount of time for people to basically have to stay dry and lock, and then leave if they need to and come back and still have their things there. And so I think that kind of leads us to where we're at today in discussion of some various structures, be it the pallet, building that's available, and different things. And so, my more immediate focus is, between now and like tonight, when it's going to be freezing rain and that sort of thing. And that's kind of the gap I'm filling. And my goal is to basically be independent from existing services, but also complementary to. Not that I don't want to work with anybody, it's just that I can literally show up in my truck with all the tools and materials needed and build a house in 3 hours for $100. So that's essentially what we've done. So.
Can you talk a little bit, Josh, about the material? I think we're getting a little bit at
the sound broke up there a little bit. Sorry.
Do you mind talking a little bit about the materials you're using to build and construct these houses?
Yeah, so what I've seen out there.
And I wouldn't put you on mute because I was getting a bit of an echo from you, Josh. So
Okay.
you can go ahead and unmute now.
Okay. So what I've seen out there is people are struggling to survive. They're using tents.
Josh, I think you're muted. You got it. There's a little button down there on the little mute.
All right. Sorry. It's my first time on the old Google video call here, so. Anyway, what I've seen out there, and you can see it for yourself, is basically these people have assembled whatever they can for shelter. And usually, sometimes if they're lucky, they start with a tent. And then for insulation purposes, they throw blankets on them, which get wet and then kind of crush the tent. And then sometimes they have tarps. They're using everything they can, garbage, all kinds of stuff. And it's really kind of sad, actually, to see. But so what I've attempted to do is construct something that is more viable and long-term in terms of materials. So, and then it's movable as well. So essentially, it's a 7-foot by 8-foot structure, and the materials we're using are pallets made of wood that we assemble in a way that is structurally sound. To prevent the elements from coming in, and then we wrap it in a vapor barrier, and we've recently put on tar paper for the roofing material. And as far as a door, we do have a piece of plywood that's lockable. One of the houses has a little door on it, and basically that's kind of where we're at. And then it's left up to the people who, I guess, dwell inside to, if they vacate it or want to stay there, they can add shelves or whatever. But my goal is to basically fill in the gap between now and when the sanctuary space opens, and then when we get a better structure delivered and built and have people in it. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of my goal here, is to fill in the gaps. So that's where we're at. And as far as safety measures, each house gets a fire extinguisher, a fire alarm, and a carbon monoxide detector. So there's one even on the outside of one of the buildings, so that it's accessible to anybody walking by in case there were a fire.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to pick some photos of the structure, and so just so we have like a shared and talking about, I'll just go ahead and pull it out. So you can sort of see the I think the pallet structure. Josh, how many of you built? And I went ahead and muted you again because I'm getting a bit of an echo from you. So you can go ahead and pull off mute. Okay. How many of you built 4 now?
Well, how would you say? There's one on the corner there. I didn't build that one. We kind of reinforced it last night because somebody basically put up pieces of plywood and didn't use any 2x4s to provide any structure. So. The first one we built, it's kind of hard to tell behind that plastic. Some guy got a roll of plastic there and has, I guess, covered his tent structure. So there's 4 there. 2 are kind of connected. And the first one, a homeless veteran moved into, and he's living in there now. And I called this morning to get him some social services through the MASH program and through the VA. He's a veteran with a dog. And he needs, some, I guess, mental health assistance and different things. So, my goal with these little structures isn't for long-term habitation or anything like that. It's basically just to keep them out of the elements. So, yeah, that's where they're at. So.
Yeah. Okay, Chief, I'm going to turn it over to you for some quick thoughts.
Yeah. So obviously, I've tried to research kind of what you have been doing, and in doing found that there's I guess palletshelter.com. Have you seen those? Where I think Redondo Beach, California, and some other people are doing them, and they're more of a thing actually enclosed with aluminum siding, and they're using some form of lightweight wood material to construct them. But in general, present they're a high-class commodity, so they're a high-class fire hazard. What concerns me, and I get where you're coming from, trying to house them, doing for warmth. Obviously, it takes them out of the elements. But tonight, when it's 17, what are they doing for heat? Are they putting space heaters in there to light fires? Even with the plastics I saw that you wrapped, those are all items that are extremely combustible, and they're actually too close were to catch on fire. the likelihood of the other ones catching on fire, great. And that produces, again, a high fire hazard, which is a concern from, and I guess from a city standpoint, I shouldn't speak on behalf of the city, but what are we doing, again, I think with the homeless concern is where are we placing these? Are they in set locations, or are these popping up just wherever? Are they on property that's allowed to be on there? Is the property owner will approve them to be there? So these are all the factors we're running into with the homelessness. Obviously we have issues with them under our infrastructure and starting fires, holding fires to stay warm. And I get that you have to survive, but it's causing property damage, which could be, is costing us a lot of money as a city. And so we need to figure out a better solution going forward. I wholeheartedly agree. But I do have concerns with just the materials, the proximity they are together. I do like that you are giving them at least a fire extinguisher, a smoke detector, and a carbon monoxide detector.
Yeah.
And then, again, I like the idea I like the path we're going. I just think it needs to be improved and built upon to do something else. And I understand your need for immediacy to get the weather. And I try to show compassion towards that and understand that. Because I couldn't imagine being on the streets tonight, without to get out from underneath it. So, but from the fire side, I have to express my concern about the hazards they're presented by doing what.
And I'll just hop in here, and sort of the bottom line, Josh, is that I think right now, Chief, these are being built on city property, which presents its own series of challenges. If this property, we'd be having a slightly different discussion right now, but they're not. They're on public property, which puts the liability on the city of Chattanooga. So it's not just your problem or the problem of the people living in there. If somebody gets hurt or worse, it's the entire city's responsibility to make doesn't happen. And if something does happen, the public is rightfully going to ask, why did you allow these structures to property if you knew they were unsafe? And so, and Sam, what is their typical protocol around cold weather shelter, and when does that typically kick in?
The cold weather shelter is active right now at the community kitchen.
And so we currently have opportunities for people to get out of the freezing weather, given the safety to life and health of these conditions that are outside right now. But again, frankly, an untenable situation for us, Josh. And I want to talk about Chief brought up pallet shelters, and I wanted to kind of show you what those look like. This is something that
I've already got pricing and a PDF on them.
Yeah, this is something that we certainly are open to, but I just don't have. I think we have to figure out a solution to transition out of this very quickly, because he put them in a really bad spot, and also so are these folks that are living in them. And I understand, it feels like a helpful thing to do right now, but then it'll be a real tragedy that could have been prevented, and that's what we're trying to do right now.
Yeah, I guess who's liable if people die on the streets from exposure to cold, if they have nothing to basically keep dry from? Because I would challenge anyone who opposes this potential building to stand out in the rain for 24 hours when it's 19 degrees and then see who's left standing. You know what I'm saying? And I understand your concerns from a public standpoint, and the people are already there living among garbage and fecal matter, and it's really a despair, and then violence and all the other things that occur out there. So I think it's a step in the right direction, and how we step and how carefully we step is important to consider. But these people are technically already trespassing, and where do they go? That's the question. How do we help? And from the people who are dwelling in the spaces, I asked them last night, what's the greater risk? Are you more at risk to be outside in the rain and the cold, or are you more at risk to be in a warm, safe, dry shelter? And they unanimously said being in here is way better. And so I understand the combustibility factor of anything. I weld metals, and again, have a lot of certifications and training in hazmat material, and so I think you have to look at it from a real human aspect. If someone's crippled or even hypothermic, if you treat hypothermia or understand the phases of hypothermia, you'll know that that's a greater risk than a fire hazard. If you were sleeping and you got burned, I assure you'd wake up. And these spaces aren't you're not incapable of getting out of it if there were an issue. And again, with the fire alarms and fire extinguishers and having people on site at all times, I think that sort of alleviates that. And I think everyone's trying to cover their bases and trying to cover any potential liability or litigation from the future. But the real cold hard facts are that it's cold, and sleeping out when it's in the snow it's not conducive to human life. And so when you look at risk factors, again, being in the military, you look at risk factors and you weigh them, and you say, and you can get out statistics. I've got a business degree and I'm really good at math, but you can look at the statistical analysis of what is the more risk to life. At the end of the day, what is life? It's when you take your first breath and when you take your last, and what that's life, essentially, a beating heart. And so if someone's hypothermic, their heart rate starts to go down, and the blood flow to extremities decreases to the central core of your heart and your brain, and those last two things go. And so when you get hypothermic, you can't walk, you can't make it to the cold weather shelter. If you don't have a phone, you don't know when it's going to rain. You don't know how cold it's going to get, unless they have access to that technology and information. As far as I've seen, nobody's out there letting these people know. There's no weather advisory to the homeless folks out there. They're their own cell of people, And so I think it's important for us to have this meeting to, basically relieve yourselves from potential liability. But I'm putting my butt on the line at the end of the day for these people, just like I did when I was in the military, And I think firefighters do that, police people do that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want you to know that I'm hearing everything. However, we are a city who has adopted building codes and requirements, and we're building housing, which does not mean, again, we say this every day, you provide these items for them. You provide them with extinguishers. You provide them with smoke detectors. Are they stuff you put them in? We don't know these. So, again, I hear everything that you're saying. I just think it requires a bigger view and a more direct path than we can all agree upon, and not just more of which I get is your calling, is to serve and to take action now.
Yeah.
And I think as a city, we want to see action taken, but we need it to be taken in the correct path, where we all is the correct thing plus the safe thing.
Yeah.
Right now, I have a lot of concerns. Again, if you just saw the fire in Philadelphia, the housing authority put 4 smoke detectors into that house. Guess what was there? It wasn't working when the fire occurred, the 4 smoke detectors, because people take them down. We see that daily. People will remove the safety items we put in for them.
Yeah. Well,
again, what this looks like. Again, you say they're able to get out, but these people either have mental health, is the majority of them. So when we find them, a lot of times, they're intoxicated or under the influence of something, and can barely function.
Yeah.
So those are concerns that I have as well, of them being able to self-advocate for themselves and get preservation and get out. As far as going from Sam's side of it, notification, I agree. We should have some form of notification that gets pushed out to at least these encampments we're aware of, to let them know that there is severe weather coming in. Those are actions that can talk to each other. We can move towards and put something in place so that we can do that. I'm not going to speak for Sam because he doesn't do it, but if it's something else we can try and use different agencies so it's not all put onto him, maybe the fire department goes by encampments we're aware of and we put something out.
Yeah, for sure, because it's coming out of...
These are goals to see achieved. And so I just want to do it the right way. And right now I have a lot of concern over the path we're on, I guess is the best way for me to. But
Yeah.
A couple of things, just to jump in real quickly to talk about what's being done. The community kitchen does have a text alert system that they send out information to folks that historically homeless healthcare and the community kitchen have gone out and spoken to the people kind of on the 11th Street core in that few block area. I don't know if they have done this in this past instance, but their outreach worker, Joe Brackett at Homeless Healthcare, is a good friend of mine, and I know he usually has those communications. Also, we have a regional outreach collective in partnership with the Chattanooga Regional Homeless Coalition who do this kind of inclement weather prep, and teams in our kind of team communication talking about that they're going and hitting locations, dropping off extra supplies as we have them, blankets and stuff and whatnot. So they're all doing to kind of combat these things. And, I think it is difficult to say, like, with any type of certainty that we get 100% of this population because the people are spread out the locations, and it is tough to kind of meet the needs of everybody. But we are making an effort. The underscore too, and this isn't. I by no means want to say that this is the end all be all, but the cold weather shelter is open. Like the person that is the veteran with their dog, I'm sure that they are choosing to not go stay in that shelter because if they have an animal and the animal provides companionship for them. Understand that. However, they could, if they wanted to, go stay there. Like McCamey allows to have to board animals for people experiencing homeless housing. We've kind of worked with that in the past. Like there are options for people, and there is some level of choice. Like I guarantee you, if any one of those people showed up and said, I would like a place to stay, they would work to accommodate them. And there is some level of them making that choice to not go stay there. They may have their own reasons. I'm not trying to say those aren't valid, but I think when we get down to life or death scenarios like this, that's kind of what we have to deal with, in terms of giving people options to be, really enough from the standpoint of there always are going to be people sleeping on the streets making those decisions. And I think the onus is on us as the city to try to work with those people and meet their needs. However, it could be a thing where we're dumping less amounts of resources in this. Line with this is it's easy because, and I've done street outreach for years, 5 years. I know the feeling of I got to solve this problem right away. But I think more often than not, the people who are out on the streets are so desperate, they're willing to take any type of help that they can get. And I'm sure the people you talk to, Josh, are saying, yes, I'd love it to be an improvement for them. However, they don't always, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? They don't always have the ability to kind of think, in more concrete ways. I'm putting myself at risk here and possibly, putting myself into a death trap if this structure catches on fire. And that's what I'm worried about, is these people kind of being folks kind of keeping an eye on them or working on them. And that's the difference in what we're trying to do with this encampment, where we have staff that are there, that are kind of helping monitoring it, making sure the structures are spaced out, people are checking in on folks. Because if we just give people these spaces without kind of checking in on them, I think we're setting them up for disaster.
Yeah. Do you have a timeline on when you're going to get them open, concretely?
You
did, Josh.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I was just saying, do you have a timeline on when, I guess those units will be in place for people to occupy?
We're open to having that discussion. We can move on something like that as quickly as, in the next several weeks. On that, we have a cold weather shelter open right now, today. People can go there. And I think that, as we talk about if smaller structures are something that you're participating in, we can help you and connect you with Regional Homeless Coalition, which is working on potentially bringing those to Chattanooga. That's something that we are open and we can have a productive conversation about that. But what I want to underscore is that this is not a liability for us, in the sense that we aren't having this conversation to protect ourselves from liability. We don't this is I think a conversation between us and you. We have concerns with what's happening, and we have to make a decision after this conversation about how we're going to proceed. And telling you now is that it is an untenable situation for those structures to continue in the way that they are. because frankly, my job, I know, and especially Chief Matlock's job and Sam's job is to keep people safe and prevent a loss of life. I'll let our lawyers worry about the life. The bigger question that we have is that there is a potential tragedy that is, it is very cold outside, and you bring up a really good point. People need shelter, which is why that cold weather shelters are very cold outside, and the pieces of wood that are there are not going to reduce the temptation to start a fire or bring a space heater in, which dramatically increases that's going to happen. And so from a decision, sort of a fork in the road right now for us is, either we want to find a housing solution for every single person currently living in those spaces, and then we work with you to, see a path forward on those pallet units, get those maybe adjacent to our People's Street location and the sanctioned encampment, and that's something we can work on together, or we have to go and work on this on our own as to come up with the solution to effectively relocate those folks in the shelters, and come up with a plan to remove those pallet shelters. And I understand how frustrating that is, because I know you built them and you took the time to put them together and raise money for them. But we have a basic commitment to public safety that we have to fulfill, and that's on us. And so I just kind of want to leave it there. Any additional thoughts on that?
I mean, what you've said, I think, is the path we're going to have to look. It requires us coming together. This is the first I've been brought into it without doing a lot of research on it. So, in my brief research, I started looking at Redondo Beach, which I think the resources are out there. It's just us taking the time to sit down to figure out what the right direction is, where everybody is comfortable, and where these individuals are safe. I don't think that, obviously we have the same concerns you do, Josh, as far as them freezing at night, or it seems like every time we have a large rain event, a body shows up in one of the waterways, and that's usually from where they are sleeping on the banks or underneath the bridge somewhere. Not only that, but their human waste, their drug paraphernalia, everything else gets washed into our waterways as well with that. So we know there is a need. How we provide a service for that, I guess, is the question. But what we have, like Joda was saying, I think all what you're putting into it, but what you've done to this point is just not acceptable from a city standpoint as a safe environment to put these people. Protect them from the inclement weather, we get that. But again, it brings other hazards to the table that we have to address as well.
All right. Well, I guess I'll leave with this, or just kind of close in saying that, if you look at the greatest risk to people in the existence of their life is safety and security, and people, I think have a strong sense of what they need on a very human and natural level. If you're hungry, you don't need someone to tell you you're hungry. If you're cold, you don't need someone to tell you you're cold. You don't need a thermometer. If it's raining, you can look outside and, tell that it's raining or feel the wetness. And so, I don't have the technical information about the cold weather shelter, when it's open, the operating times, or the capacity and the ability for people to actually get there, and then classify that into the different levels of homelessness for people if they're newly homeless and don't know where the shelter is, or they're 15 miles away, or if they have a physical handicap. There's one lady out there right now I saw last night who's in a wheelchair and has been as long as I've seen her, for months. She pushes herself backwards about 5 inches at a time with 1 foot. Okay? And so there's no one to push her wheelchair. And there's a guy I was feeding this summer who had no legs and was mostly blind. He died out there this summer on the sidewalk in front of the police station, right outside of the cold weather shelter at the community kitchen. That bears on me heavily. So, I understand the concerns and the top level aspects of, long-term zoning and planning and fire risk and mitigation and all these things. I do. I understand it very well. And perhaps, Chief, we could meet down there, ground level, boots on the ground, look at these structures and say, hey, this works, this doesn't. Things burn. That's nature. wildfires occur, but you look at the propensity and the possibility of that compared to how many days is it going to be cold. And if anybody takes those people out of those homes and says they can't occupy them, then you must challenge yourself to go outside at least for 24 hours when it's cold and see how well you can come to work and basically habitate, or do it for a week. I challenge you to do that. And so what I've tried to do is fill in the gaps. And of course there's going to be gaps in society, and especially with respect to time, because you talk about several weeks with these pallet structures, which sound great, look great, all that sort of stuff, but I'm looking at the time factor. How many more people have to die due to exposure, and who's liable for that? I'm not a litigious person. I'm not particularly afraid to do what I feel is right. I realized that obviously I'm putting myself in harm's way to hopefully protect people. And if you ask them on a very real human level, if they're better off at the shelter and then put out because it's 42 and not 40 degrees, then they got to walk around with a backpack for however long. That's why those people are out there living in tents and sleeping bags, because they don't have a home to go back to. Sleeping on the sidewalk and not knowing what the next day is going to be like is severely traumatizing for people, and they have to go through this day in and day out. So you have to ask the question, is a mental disorder from their nature or the nurture aspect? Are they just put out when it's convenient and then brought in when the weather's at 39? I don't know. But from a mental health aspect, it's very stressful for people to be out there. And the fact that, we've spent a lot of time and a little bit of money building these temporary movable structures that happen to be out of wood, which your house is probably made out of wood as well, provides a sense of security and a sense of hope. And if you take that from them, that's going to basically destroy any sense of security that we've attempted to build up as an independent grassroots community. And so, I would be forced to make as many people aware of that as possible, and surely hold anybody who takes that home away from those people accountable to the highest degree of any human capacity. And so, with that said, I hope and pray that you don't, impede someone's sense of habitation and humanity without giving them proper due respect and time and a resource that works for them and their needs with respect to their mental capacity and cognition and ability to choose for themselves what they feel is right, with just respect to who the property owner is and what existing laws are. Because as far as I understand, and according to other city zoning regulations and fire regulations, there is a gray area in which we are operating, but essentially structures under 400 square feet or somewhere thereabouts, at least under 100 square feet, are not technically regulated by certain and or evolving and innovative solutions to, temporary habitation in small, very small spaces. So, I understand and respect everyone's concerns. However, I do feel the great desire and need to provide at least temporary emergency shelter for these folks, be it out of pallets or something that can hold up to 10 miles an hour wind or more, because tents just aren't cutting it, and they're much more flammable than whatever we're building. So, I guess that's all I've got to say about that. You can say whatever, but I just hope that we can find a way to work together. I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes or say I'm just doing this on my own and just going to put them wherever. That's not what I'm trying to do. I have let Sam know. I've tried to let everybody know. That's why I sent the email. I went to the mayor's office back in June when it was really hot out. I called the fire department. I called everybody. I called the police. I called Salvation Army. I called Red Cross. The only people that called me back were the fire department. And I went to City Hall. You've seen me go to City Hall. I've been bleeding my heart out to help these people, and I just cannot stand by while there's no action. In the military, there's a sense of urgency, and that's what happens. You get to work, and you kind of figure it out as you go. And so I think that's what we're doing. But I guess I'm trying to really fill in that gap. And if you want to, if there's another solution, we have a place for people to be, and that's why I made it movable. You can take a forklift and throw the thing in the dumpster, but we got to make sure that there's not people still out there who would like to stay in it, because essentially I haven't had any issues with people staying in there in terms of finding people to go in there willingly. But they just show up and are in there even before I can get doors on. That's how that veteran got in there. He was sleeping on pallets, out in the bushes for real. And I don't know. I've been trying everything to help these people, so I can't imagine taking away the homes from these people and then just destroying them because, you know, somebody's concerned about a little bit of liability or whatever. But if you look at the scientific facts, you know, they're more probable to die from exposure due to cold than they are of a potential fire, I can assure you. So.
Well, you know, again, I think we've all laid out our concerns here, and you know, we're going to have to go back and talk about our next steps. But I think you know, Sam's team is, you guys have housed, I mean, how many people at this point? Over 1,000 folks, Sam?
Exception, like 1,500.
Yeah, and so, you know, it is not beyond our capacity to find homes for the folks who are currently staying in the shelter. And I want to underscore that this is something that, you know, we've been in office for 10 months. The previous administration, we also worked on this. You know, homelessness is no single community has figured out. And this is not something that hasn't been resolved because nobody's trying. You know, we just purchased a nearly $3 million building to, you know, another 200 units of supportive housing where people can stay, because we know that the long-term solution for this is a home. And, you know, an obligation that whenever we go and make the decisions that we do to try and help people, that we aren't causing more damage or harm at the same time. And so that's something I reflect on and think about, because, yes, people will suffer from the elements, and it's heartbreaking, and it's something that we're working. But if the temporary solution puts us back more steps than it puts us forward, you know, particularly for the person that might be at risk of dying in a fire. I think that's something that we have to take serious, to your point. But at the end of the day, the city also has an obligation to public safety in a way that, you know, we have to be, and Sam and I have to have a broader responsibility to human life, and we have to make sure that, you know, whenever we're making these decisions, that we're taking that into account. You're up to date and informed, but you know, I do want you to know that we, you know, we're going to do our best and expend every can to make sure that folks are having, you know, access to shelter, particularly when we make a decision about the destruction system. Sam, can you keep Josh in the loop as we continue to move forward?
Will do.
All right. Bye.
Wow.